levels of physical reality in what you call the fourth dimension, 3 of space, 1 of time. Physical reality as an experience has different density levels in it. Third density is a lower vibration of the fourth dimension. Fourth density is a higher vibration, which is where many people are now heading, ascending, leveling up their vibration to become a more refined version of the physical experience in the fourth dimensional reality. But the fifth dimension is actually crossing into non-physical reality. So fifth density is the first density level in non-physical reality in the fifth dimension. You can tap into the fifth dimension, and tapping into the energy of the fifth dimension can pull you up in the fourth dimension so that you can become a fourth density being in the fourth dimension. So another way of saying this is that as you might have started out as a third density being in physical reality, allowing yourself to tap into your higher mind, which is in a non-physical reality, fifth density, fifth dimension, can allow you to raise your frequency to become a fourth density, fourth dimensional being, a higher version of yourself in physical reality that's more in alignment with the fifth density, fifth dimensional higher mind that exists in non-physical reality. So densities are kind of like states within a country. Dimensions are like a different country.
And is the negative belief that's always trying to perpetuate itself and survive actually a negative parallel version of yourself that is vying to exist?
Well, it's not vying to exist. A negative belief that is attempting to perpetuate itself can be representative of a counterpart in another reality entirely. Yes, it can be, but it exists. Not vying to exist. The belief in your reality is your choice to buy into. It can be representative of a belief system of another version of you in another reality, but it exists. That reality exists. That version of you exists as well.
Okay. And can you please give advice on how to deal with obsessive negative thoughts? This person keeps trying to get out of the loop, but they can't, and it's putting them in a position of despair, especially because I know I'm creating it. It's a no-ending loop.
All right. But again, if you know you're creating it, then you're creating it for a reason. And again, it goes back to the motivational mechanism. You don't keep generating things that you don't believe serve you. In other words, you have a belief that the alternative, letting go of this, would actually be worse. So you have to find out why you believe that letting go of this would actually be worse. You have to find out what that belief is telling you, what that story is saying that you have bought into as a fact, that letting go of this and moving forward would be worse. It's not a fact, it's just a belief. But you have to find out why you believe that going forward would be worse than staying where you are, even as uncomfortable as where you are may be. So your despair is simply a lack of willingness to discover what the belief is that you're afraid will happen if you in fact let go of the things that you're continuing to choose that don't serve you, because you believe the alternative would be even worse. So you have to have real honesty in investigating yourself and digging down, and not be afraid to find out what you're afraid of that you believe will happen if you let go of the things you keep choosing. So the loop that you're talking about, you're choosing it and you're creating it because you believe the alternative, letting go of the loop, coming out of the loop, would actually cause something to happen that's even worse than experiencing the loop. No matter how desperate and despairing the loop may be, clearly you have a belief that the alternative is worse. You have to find out what that belief is and see that it's nonsensical. It's not a fact. It's just a story. And you don't have to buy into it. Again, you only choose to believe the things that you believe serve you. You only choose those things that you believe serve you. So There must be something about staying in the loop that you believe serves you. And very often that can be that it prevents you from experiencing something you believe would be worse if you stepped out of the loop. So do your investigation and find out what that is telling you, what that story is that doesn't work for you, and realize that it's simply a story and it's not a fact, that things would be worse if you stepped out of the loop.
Okay, and this person is asking, how would you teach children of Earth the spirit of Christmas? They feel torn between not wanting their daughter to miss out on the whole Santa Claus experience, but also dreading the day she finds out that he isn't real. I feel there's a better storyline to start her first Christmas off with. My excitement is more towards the magic and spirit of the winter season and solstice, but I'm uncertain about the most effective way to make this a Christmas narrative.
Well, in a sense, you have said it right up front. The spirit of Christmas. In other words, the idea of Santa Claus doesn't have to necessarily be physically real to be an actually existing archetype in your collective consciousness as human beings. So it is real as a spirit, as an archetype of a collection of humanity. So you can explain the difference between something manifesting as a physical being and something manifesting simply as an archetypal spirit, a level of consciousness that is real unto itself and autonomously existing, but as a higher level being, a higher level expression of the collective of humanity that is in compassion and love and giving and service. So it's a real being on that level in its own right. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to manifest physically. So you can elevate the understanding of Santa Claus by understanding that it is connected to the season in an archetypal way, as an actual being of spirit, a collective being, an archetypal being. That doesn't mean it has to be perceived always as a physical being. So as a child, it might be easier to explain as a physical being, but then as the child matures, you can say, well, it's not so much that it's physical in the way we are as humans, but it's an archetypal spirit that is representative of a collective of all of our love and all of our giving and all of our willingness to be of service and share and give each other gifts. So there's a way to elevate the idea by actually referring to it as the spirit of Christmas.
That's so wonderful, that I think one time you did a session called Is There a Santa Claus? And
Yes.
it's very exciting that there's an archetypal Santa Claus.
Yes.
And you can work with that just like any kind of archetype if
Yes.
you are so attracted to it. So there's so
Yes,
many
yes,
magical
yes.
things that you can give to children around the idea of Santa Claus and what it means and all the expansive ways that we can express ourselves.
Yes. And sometimes, again, depending upon the belief system of the person and depending upon their rate of vibration, they may actually be able to perceive the archetypal spirit that represents the concept of Santa Claus as if it does manifest physically. Because archetypes can present themselves that way to people who are sensitive to that frequency. That doesn't mean, again, it's exactly physical in the way that you are. It's almost more like the way elementals present themselves, by manipulating energy of the collective consciousness like clay and providing a manifestation that is temporary, but that can be perceived by human senses who are sensitive enough to that frequency. So it has to be explained in a multitude of ways, but it is a real archetypal consciousness.
And it's interesting too that it can be used as a permission slip to allow yourself to receive gifts.
Yes.
That because that's the idea that Santa Claus gives you the gifts that you want. It's this great
Not just
idea.
receive, give gifts as well.
Right.
Mutual exchange.
This person has a question about passion and money.
Yeah.
As an actor, speaker, mentor, and entrepreneur, I've followed my passion for many years. Now I seek financial support to sustain and continue to follow my passion and uplifting others. Any advice on navigating this journey towards financial independence?
No, because the idea is not to focus on the idea of money alone as the only representative of abundance that can help you continue to act on your passion. As we have said many, many times, the idea is that there are many forms of abundance. And if you're only focused on one as the only way that you can continue to act on your passion, then you're closing the doors through which other forms of abundance could come that might actually be representative of the path of least resistance and might happen actually more easily than the idea of receiving money. Money is fine as a representation of abundance on your planet, but it's only one representation, one symbol of exchange. Having something to trade with is a form of abundance. Being given a gift is a form of abundance. Synchronicity is a form of abundance. Imagination is a form of abundance. Communication is a form of abundance, as we would think you would know as an actor. So the idea is that when you use your imagination and your creativity and your communication, you can think of other ways in which things can be accomplished that might not require as much money. You have to be willing to be of a higher vibration so that you can be inspired to ask the questions and communicate the things that might not seem like they would work, but on a higher level would work. That would allow you to continue to act on your passion. We've told the story of the photographer that flew around the world and got paid for it because she was willing to ask the airline if they could fly her around the world to take photographs of sacred sites for free, but knew there had to be some form of exchange, which was the idea that they would get to use her photographs of all the sacred sites in their brochures to attract tourists to their airlines. So they did not only fly her around the world for free, they paid her, put her up in the best hotels, fed her the best food. The idea is that she was willing to try the idea of communicating to them and ask them to fly her around the world for free in exchange for using her photographs, which she never would have thought of had she been stuck on the idea that she needed money, which she never would have had to be able to do that. So you really have to think outside the box and allow all the forms of abundance to work together. Maybe a little bit of money will come in. Maybe someone will give you a gift. Maybe you will communicate something to someone that will change things up and give you a different path to take. Maybe synchronicity will bring you something you weren't expecting. Surprise, surprise. And thus, working together, all the forms of abundance would give you the 100% abundance you need to move forward and continue to be able to act on your passion. Remember, abundance by definition, from our point of view, is simply the ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. We're not saying in exactly what way that has to happen, and you need to relax your definition and defocus off only money being the only way, because then the other ways cannot get to you.
Okay, and this viewer writes about their difficult childhood. How can I recognize my worthiness of love despite a challenging childhood? If I'm inherently worth loving, how can I reconcile past experiences that seem devoid of true love and support? Additionally, do these experiences serve a purpose in contributing to the healing of painful childhoods for others on Earth? Are there parallel realities where different versions of me had happier, healthier upbringings, and what might be their soul goals?
Yes, and we're not going to get into the soul goals of parallel realities. We're going to talk to you about the idea that clearly what you chose to experience is something that would allow you to understand that you need to give yourself the love that clearly was not given to you as a child. So the theme that you chose to explore was the idea of going into an experience where you would be forced to be the one to give yourself the love that you need, because that's exactly what many people on your planet need to learn to do. Love themselves unconditionally, regardless of their experiences. So you can't look at it in a negative way. You chose to experience the idea of not being able to receive that as a child in order to understand that that's what you would want to go toward, that that's where you would be driven to go, in that direction of seeking to give yourself the love that you believe you were not being given as a child. Paradoxically, by choosing the situation where you were not physically given the love that you sought. The idea is that that was a very loving thing that parts of your soul family were willing to do for you in order to give you the opportunity to experience how to overcome that, transform that, and give yourself all the love that you believed you were missing in your childhood. So it's actually an act of love that you didn't receive the physical love. It's not an excuse, not saying that it excuses any perpetrators of things like abuse, emotionally, physically, or otherwise. But the idea is that an arrangement was made so that you would be driven to seek the love within yourself, that you driven to seek the connection to source that would allow you to know you are worthy of love. But that's just the way you decided to do it, to prove how strong you are. Remember, Earth is a graduating master class. Earth is a tough school, but you're up to the task. And so you had the strength to come in as a spirit and say, I'm going to have the experience of being deprived of love so that I will be driven to seek it out and give it to myself, to learn to do that, to love myself unconditionally, to learn that I am worthy, to state that I am worthy, to insist that I am worthy. That is the lesson and the task and the theme here for you.
Thank you. When we raise our frequency to higher levels of physical reality, are the people we interact with the same souls? In other words, when we raise ourselves to become more onto more positive timelines, are our loved ones the same souls across timelines?
They may be the same oversouls, but they're not necessarily the same souls. So different souls can be representative of different parallel realities, but a larger version of an oversoul, say an oversoul of an oversoul, may be the same oversoul of oversouls that has extensions in multiple parallel realities, but each of those extensions is an individual soul that's different for the individual physical being in that parallel reality. So you're interacting with different souls, just like you're interacting with different versions of them physically, different higher minds, but maybe the same oversoul of oversouls. So again, it depends on what level you're looking at as to when you can say, is it the same? Are these the same beings? Depends on what level of being you're talking about.
Okay. So I'm going to move on now to some ET questions.
Yes.
This individual is asking about how disclosure will unfold. Given the premise that governments are founded on collective representation and considering the diverse perspectives on non-human intelligence, it seems unlikely that they would provide a wholly accurate disclosure or even a watered-down version. Based upon my experiences, it seems likely that most people will have their own unique experiences, whether individually or in groups, such as witnessing crafts or orbs. This will continue until a critical mass is reached where most people have seen something extraordinary. At this pivotal moment, it would become common for everyone to see these phenomena, leading to a widespread disclosure and open contact. I know you don't do predictions, but based upon how things are going in this reality, is this an accurate assessment of how disclosure will unfold?
In general, yes. There may be a little bit more information released by some of your governmental bodies at a pace they feel comfortable with. But again, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the pace that some people on your planet are comfortable with and the pace at which we are comfortable with. One of the things that many people on your planet don't think about is the idea that disclosure and open contact can come from our side of the agenda as well, in terms of how it happens. You, as humans, determine it to some degree, but you're not the sole determiners of the idea with regard to your institutions. The idea of your general population and what they're willing to be open to is the greater determinant about how open contact will happen. So you have to also remember that for some indigenous cultures, open contact has been happening for thousands of years already. So the rest of the world needs to catch up. But yes, in general, your assessment is accurate. It will be a collective kind of realization that so many people are now aware of our existence that it will someday, relatively soon, simply be a fact that we exist. And it'll already be something that will be a given. And open contact will smoothly expand throughout your society because everyone will simply be acknowledging something that they already know. But there will be a trigger. There will be several triggers for this. There will be things that will happen that will allow people to get used to the idea in greater and greater numbers. As we said, there is still a high probability at the end of your 2026, the beginning of 2027, for a UFO event, an ET event. We're not going to describe it specifically, but an event that may open the eyes of many individuals as to our existence, and also through your own devices, finally discovering that life exists on other planets can open your mind to the possibilities of open contact as well. All of this will generally, as we read your energy now, occur within the next 30 to 40 years at the outside, with certain markers accelerating within that time frame. So by 2033, 2040, in the next 20, 30, 40 years, your world will be very different in terms of what it knows about our existence.
That's exciting.
Yes.
In the movie Contact, there was a scene where Jodie Foster goes through this a machine, and then she ends up in a wormhole, and then she has this contact experience.
Yes.
Both from symbolic and also just the more real aspects of what contact would be like. Can you take that scenario that they showed in that movie and help us understand how a lot of that might actually be fairly accurate?
Well, in a sense, it's a depiction of what's already happening, isn't it? Because you are being fed information, but in a way that you can handle, in a way that's familiar to you. You are being fed information through channels, such as what's happening right now, because the channel is a human that you're familiar with. And therefore, you're receiving information that leaves it up to you to determine how real it is for you, whether we really exist or not, or whether the information is simply coming from another version of the channel. So in many ways, what was depicted in that movie is what's actually happening. You are being presented with an idea, but in terms that you are comfortable and familiar with, to determine for yourself how much of it is going to be absorbed and applied in your reality and how much might be left out. So in a sense, what the movie symbolized is happening.
And sort of the idea of them falling through that machine that changed their frequency to allow them to have contact, right?
Yes.
That would be similar idea.
Yes, presented in a technological way, which again can exist and does exist in many civilizations. But again, the symbology is the idea that everything is happening in the now, that time is relative, that you're having an experience of receiving communication and information from extraterrestrial sources, not just us, but others as well, and that it's being given to you in a format that leaves it up to you to decide how much of it is real or not for you. So, in a way, the movie is simply a representation of what's already happening.
And this idea of ETs coming down to our vibration, how does this plane of reality, Earth, that we experience right now, affect a higher vibrational being like an ET? Do ETs need to be prepared as well to realign to a denser dimension? As humans, we've forgotten our divinity and we're remembering who we are now. What challenges do ETs face by being in this dimensional plane? I imagine them being like the enlightened masters that walk the earth as compassionate and loving teachers.
In a sense, yes, but you're assuming that we actually come all the way down to your dimensional plane, which we don't. You may not recognize it sometimes, but in a lot of encounters, you're actually shifted up to a slightly different level of reality that's more vibrationally compatible with you and us simultaneously. We can lower our vibration to a certain point, but we don't usually lower our vibration to the level that you normally exist in on a day-to-day basis. It's another level of reality that may seem like your physical reality, but isn't.
So does that mean that there's not going to be spaceships landing in our physical dimension, or
The spaceships that land will be landing in the level of reality that you will raise your vibration to meet. It will not be happening in the vibrational density that you're in right now. It will be happening in another layer of reality that is of a higher frequency. And that's not the same reality that you're in right now.
kind of reminds me of the idea that the way we see airplanes now, no big deal, and that someday that's how it will be with spaceships.
Yes, but you have to be in a different level of reality to see them that way,
Right.
experience them in the same way you experience your airplanes. It's just that the transition may be so smooth that you don't realize you've actually gone up to another level of reality. As we have often reminded you, a person 300 years ago would look at you as if you're glowing with light because you're much higher in frequency than they used to be 300 years ago. But to you, it's normal, so you don't see it. But the idea of contact is going to take place in another layer of reality. There are many layers of your reality. Earth is like an onion with many dimensions wrapped around it. And therefore, there are more refined levels of physical reality and even into the lower astral than you think. So the idea vibrationally is that while it may seem as if open contact is taking place in your typical physical reality, it's not.